Welcome to another week of painting with Bailey Tillotson. That's me. We're going to be doing watercolor techniques. Now, disclaimer, this is not all of them, but these are the ones that I use on a daily basis. So, let's get started. All right, first things first, we're going to tape our page off. We are going to separate it into 4 different rows. The top 3 are about the same size. And then the bottom has more of like a quarter of the page. So once you have that, you can tape down the middle, and the top row is going to have 6 different sections. And then the bottom bigger section, you're just splitting one side in half. So once you have that, we're ready to go. All right, we are going to do a wet on dry technique, or a lot of people will call this a wash, your first wash. So this is used in a few different situations. When your paper is clean and nothing's on it and you're putting your first layer down, that is wet on dry. Or if you're wanting to add layers to your paintings, you will do this once that first layer or second layer, whatever the layer is before it, is already dry. So the way I do this is I am bringing my brush along and just getting rid of those puddles to make it one even wash. And I have my paper towel. This will show you, you can just kind of pick up that paint and then dab it off into the paper towel until it's as even toned as you would like it. For this next technique, it is called lifting. So what I'm going to have you do is put a clean wash across the whole thing, just like our first square, and then we're going to start lifting that pigment off. This is a technique that is so awesome when you're first learning because it's very forgiving. If you put a color down that's too dark or more vibrant than you want, this is something that can really save your butt. So I use it pretty often. Just when I notice that I want some highlights in my paintings. So what you're doing is grabbing a clean brush and you're just lifting that paint off and dabbing it onto your paper towel. So you can do a few lines to get yourself more familiar with this method. Okay, we're going to move on to the technique called dry brushing, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're not using a lot of water, so your brush is mostly going to be pigment. As you can see, I am loading it up with my color. So then when you put it on the paper, it leaves a little bit of that texture from the watercolor paper just to be a little bit more interesting. So you can use this for a few different things, but I will list some on our comments. But if you practice this, it will also help with your water control. Okay, so this is one of my favorites. We're going to use a white crayon, or any crayon that you have, really. I just like to use white because it shows through really well. And I'm just doing some fun little designs in my square. And then you're going to see that when we paint, that crayon, the wax repels the paint. So wherever that crayon is, the paint will not be. So let's drop in some colors and see how pretty it turns out. I use this technique pretty often when I'm wanting to add just a little bit of highlight into my paintings. So with florals, when I have like a reflective spot, or in landscapes, it's really beautiful when you can put your first layer down and then come back with crayon and then paint over it. It just adds some fun textures to your painting. But this next one we're going to do is very similar. I'm using masking fluid. I get this from Michael's. I'm sure you could get it at any hobby store. But I'm just basically painting with it, and then we're going to wait for it to dry. And once it's dry, we can paint over it, and then the masking fluid just peels right off. So while we wait for that to dry, we're just going to get right into the gradients. So we're using the middle 2 rows. And what you're going to do is grab any color that you want and grab as much pigment as you can. So the left side is going to be the most colorful. And then as you go across, you're going to dip your brush in the water and then drag it across the top so that it gets rid of some of that color in the water. So every single time you do that, it should lighten that pigment to where when you get to the other side, it's a nice smooth gradient for you. This does not need to be perfect. The first row is just really to get the concept down, and then you can come back on that second row and fine tune it, really get in there and see how you can make that transition smoother. Now that that masking fluid is dry, you can just put in whatever colors you want. I'm going to put in 2 or 3 different colors so that you can see when you peel that masking fluid off, it really does leave this pure white on the paper. All right, we are on to the last of the top row. So this is called the stubble technique. So basically what you're doing is just grabbing your paint and dabbing it onto your paper, leaving some white space. This is really awesome for when you're doing bushes, any type of trees, even like background mountain ranges. It looks so beautiful when you're able to drop in some of those colors. As you can see, I started with yellow and then I came in and dropped a little bit of orange just to show you that it's really beautiful when you mix colors together. Okay, so now we are going to move on to the left side. And basically what we're doing in this top one is we're mixing 2 colors together. So on the left side, I'm starting with blue, and I'm going across kind of like we did with the gradient, where I have my strongest pigment and then I'm slowly kind of diluting it as I go over, but I'm only going to about the middle. And then I'm coming in with red on the other side. Now you can do whatever colors you want. This is a really helpful exercise when you're wanting to get more familiar with the color wheel. It helps you to know what colors to mix to get your neutrals, or how one color is going to react to the other being right next to it. It really is just a fun way to inform your process. Okay, so for this next one, we are just going to be doing we're making a rainbow with the colors that we have. So I want you to go across and just do like a stroke of each color. So I started with orange and then I went to yellow and then green, blue, and then I'll do purple next, just because I want to do the ones that are close to each other on the color wheel. So you could even start with orange and then get your way back to orange. Okay, I saved the best 2 techniques for last. Not really, but I do love playing around with both of these techniques. This first one, we're going to do wet on wet. And the first square, we're just going to kind of mess around, dropping in some colors. And then I'm going to show you how to apply this same wet on wet technique into a really simple, beautiful sky. So what I'm going to have you do is get your paper wet with water. And you don't want it to be puddled, but you just want your page to be kind of shimmery. So once you do that, you can just drop in whatever colors you want, so you can kind of get used to how your brush and the water and the paint and everything all work together. If you find yourself putting in too much water to where it gets muddy, you can use that same lifting technique that we talked about earlier and just kind of lift off those colors so that you can have more of a clean look. All right, so now I'm just putting water pretty much the same way that we did in that first wet on wet square. And then I'm dropping in some blue for my sky. And as you can see, I'm leaving some white areas for clouds. And then I'm coming, as I get closer to the bottom, my colors get lighter. And that just helps show a little bit of dimension and where your horizon is. So I have some purple that I drop in on the top, and then I even came in with some pink to put under the clouds and just dropped kind of randomly through my sky. So it's not anything perfect, but it is so beautiful and it's so fun to play around with. So definitely try a wet on wet sky when you're just starting your landscape journey. It's a lot less intimidating than you would think. We are on to the last technique of the day. This is called the drag and drop. So I'm grabbing quite a bit of pigment and I'm making like a mountain range. So you can do a few little points in your mountain, whatever you choose to do. But as you are painting, I want you to remember that only one side of your mountain is going to be shaded. So I have chosen my left side. If you want to copy what I'm doing, that's completely fine. So once you have that first layer down, you're going to rinse your brush off and have that clean water just touch the bottom of that color that you've already put. So that will help that strong pigment to drop down lower as you go. And like I said before, you're kind of making sure that the shadowed areas are only on one side of your mountain. So now that you have dragged some of that pigment down, you can come back in and drop in some colors to just add some interest into your mountains. So as you can see, I'm putting in some purple, and it has already added some really pretty blends into the wet areas that you've created. If you wanted to, you could stop there, but if you would like, you can add just a little bit more water to your brush and kind of just blend those colors down and get rid of any of the harsh lines that you've created with that first color. And then your mountain range is done. But before we finish, I just want to show you how this technique applies to your flowers. So we're just going to jump right into creating the middle of our flower, which is using that stubble technique that we did just a little bit earlier. So you have a little circle that you made, and you're going to clean your brush off, and really you're just grabbing a little bit of that color and then bringing it outwards. You see how the water just takes that color with it? If you're wanting just a little more contrast, you can drop in some darker or lighter colors into the middle, and that color will bleed into your petals because it's still wet. But if you're wanting it or to have a little bit more control, or you don't want it in specific areas, as you can see, you can lift off that color and just dab it onto your paper towel. And you can practice this technique as many times as you want. I'm probably just going to do one more for you to look over. So again, I have the middle head of my flower, and then I rinse off my brush, and I'll come back in with a clean brush of water and grab some of that pigment out from the middle. All right, friends, that is it for today. I had so much fun. You guys, these techniques make a difference. If you practice these and apply them to your artwork, your paintings will get better, I promise you. So, if you haven't already, check out the link below. We have a watercoloring book that does 25 different floral outlines. And because I am so grateful for you, I want to give you a 23% off if you use Happy23 at checkout. Again, thanks for painting with me, and I will see you next week.